Good morning. Today is the first day of Elul and the 18th of August. And we're wrapping up our discussion of Parshat Shoftim. So many topics in so little time, but we have to choose something. So we'll take it from the seventh reading. We're going to be looking at Deuteronomy 20, verse 19, one of the most famous verses today in modern Judaism, because of one would say, the environmental side of this verse. We're not going to look at that so much, but let's read the verse first. This is in the middle of the laws of making war. And there are a great number of these laws, and one of them reads like this: if you besiege a city, you must begin the siege more than 2 days before the Sabbath, and repeat your offer of peace a few times during this period before you undertake to wage war against it in order to capture it. You must not destroy its fruit trees by wielding an axe against them, for since you may eat from them, you must not cut them down. Now here in this translation, he phrases it as a question. It can be both a question and a proclamation. The tree of the field, is it not a man who is able to come into the besieged city fleeing from you? In other words, don't cut down the tree because the tree doesn't have legs and it can't run away from you. And so it can't come into the walls, into the protection of the city to run away from your axe. So from this comes this famous statement in Hebrew, Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh, that the tree of the field, or man, is a tree of the field. And again, it can be read as a question or as a proclamation. Man is a tree of the field, or is man not a tree of the field? And this is a very interesting comparison. And you can see why environmentalists took this as one of the cornerstones of environmental thought. And I think invariably any kind of a modern text that deals with environmentalism in the Torah, you will usually choose this as something in the title, or or something somewhere else in the text will be something very primary. But what exactly does this mean, that man is the tree of the field? What is it? How exactly can we even think that they are similar? So the way this is interpreted in Chassidus is as follows. We know that there are 4 kingdoms in the world. They're called the inanimate, the vegetable, animal, and the speaker, who is man. Now, if we compare this to correspond these to the 4 letters of God's essential name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, so then the speaker is the Yud, the first letter, the animal is the Hey, the vegetable is the Vav, and the last Hey is the inanimate. So we have here a very strong correspondence, and this is one that's developed many times, between the speaker and the vegetable, meaning the tree, and between the animal and the inanimate. Even in English, you can hear that animal and inanimate are related to one another, meaning, in other words, that the animal is the one who has anima, who has movement, and the inanimate is the one who has no movement. He is basically minerals or whatever other parts of the earth that are inanimate. So there it revolves around being animate. But what exactly is it that corresponds and is similar between the Yud and the Vav, between the speaker, who is man, and the tree, who is the Vav, the vegetable? So one of the interesting things, first of all, to note is that the leaves of the tree are considered to be like the mouth of the tree. In other words, we usually describe the leaves as being, especially when you have a leaf that looks a little bit like an oval, so it looks like the lips of a person. So much so that we don't have time to go over this now, but the whole concept of trees speaking, whispering, talking, which is a whole subject in and of itself. As you might know, there is what we call the language of animals, the language of trees, but the trees specifically, their language, meaning their form of expression, is through their leaves. And the way that you understand what what the trees are saying, is by listening to the rustling of the leaves. So the leaves present, in some sense, a way of expression of the tree. And in the same way that the man is the speaker, that human beings speak. But it goes deeper than that. With modern understanding of photosynthesis, we actually call the parts of the leaf that allow the water to enter and the air to enter as stoma, as mouths. They literally mean a mouth. So the leaf is, as it were, taking in the world through their mouths, through the leaves. The trees are allowing things to enter through their mouth. So all this is very good and well, and there's many other correspondences that we can draw, but in Chassidus, the way that this is understood is as follows. That if we take these three levels, the inanimate, the vegetable, and the animate, and we compare it to man's framework. So we would have that the inanimate is the body. The animate would be the intellect. And the vegetable, meaning the tree, would be the emotional realm of every person. So we have here going from below to above. I said it in the wrong order now, just to stress the vegetable being the emotions. But from below to above, we'd have the physical body, the emotional realm, the heart, and then the mind, the intellect. And interestingly enough, and obviously we have the speaker, which is above that, which is above the intellect even. And there we would say that we're dealing not just with the intellect, but with the super intelligence of the human being, the super consciousness of man. What is special about the emotions is that they undergo the most growth during a person's life. There's something that's very important about a tree, is that what you talk about when you say a tree, you're usually referring to its growth, its ability to grow, because it can't move. It's inanimate. It doesn't have the power of movement. It's stuck where it is. But nonetheless, even though it remains where it is, it's constantly maturing. It's constantly growing. The intellect is likened to an animal that can jump from place to place. Our intellect doesn't mature so much. In fact, what it really does is it only comes into its own through age, but really from the moment that the person is created, their intellect is pretty much set. The limits upon how much they can grow intellectually are already set at birth. But when it comes to the emotions, that's where the great changes occur in a person's life. The emotions are where life actually happens. And so when you compare the emotions of a 5-year-old or a 2-year-old who's throwing a temper tantrum to an adult or even an elderly person who is taking in the difficulties of life in a mature and responsible way, you see in the emotions the greatest change, the greatest growth. But it's even more than that, because emotionally, whereas we start out caring only about ourselves, the whole purpose of emotions is like a tree to provide shade, to provide fruit to others. The tree itself doesn't need the fruit and it doesn't need the shade. It's as if it's providing for others. And like the famous statement in the Talmud that a sage was sitting under a tree that had fruit and shade and a stream underneath it. And he said, "What can I bless you with? You already have everything. I bless you that all the trees that are planted from your seeds be like you." The whole point of the tree in the end is to provide for others. And that's the same idea as emotional growth. True emotional growth is when the person stops thinking about themselves and their response, their emotional response to things, and begins to think about others. That is the sign of true emotional growth. There's a very famous prophecy in Isaiah that's quoted, probably the most often quoted prophecy in the Jewish world today. And it says, you, the hills of Israel, will eventually give your trees and your fruit again. You will bear fruit again. What is all that talking about? In Chassidus, it's explained that this is not just the awakening of the land of Israel as a response to the return of the Jewish people, but it's actually an awakening of the emotional realm. When trees give fruit, it's like a person who's matured and can now provide for others emotional strength and care and all that they need. And that is the sign of the coming of the Messiah. When the world matures to such an extent that we can begin to speak about emotions, the whole topic of psychology, and we can mature the emotions in such a way that we learn how to transform them from self-serving faculties to faculties that serve others. And that is basically the difference between light that shines to the person himself and light that shines outwards. That we all are meant to be lights that illuminate our surroundings and not just illuminate ourselves. So with this thought, and there's a lot more to say about it, you know what, just one more statement. Is one of the reasons why in the end the land of Israel is the land of the 7 nations, the 7 Canaanite nations, and they're actually mentioned a couple of verses earlier, that there can be no survivors, as it were, from these 7 nations. The way we understand it, that the immature emotions should not remain intact. We have to supersede, we have to replace them with the mature emotions that come out of the intellect and are focused not just on not at all on ourselves, but rather focused on other people. That is really the message behind the conquering, the taking over the land of Israel, the land of the 7 nations in our generation. So with this, we end Parshat Shoftim this year. Hope to see everyone on Sunday. And with the new Parsha, Parashat Ki Teitzei, we'll also begin with the continuation of the laws of war. And have a Shabbat Shalom from Israel. Bye-bye. Chodesh Tov. Bye-bye.
Shabbat Shalom.